welcome to the Facility Resilience Podcast, where we cover facility design, operation, and maintenance, in addition to business resilience and continuity strategies. I'm your host, Jennifer Getz, and today I'm joined by Frank Supovitz, the President and Chief Experience Officer for Fast Traffic, an event management and consulting company with clients that have included the Indy 500, Pro Football Hall of Fame, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and the South Street Seaport in New York City. Frank is one of our keynote speakers for the 2025 Continuity Insights Management Conference, which is taking place from April 28th through April 30th in the Woodlands, Texas. Frank, thank you so much for joining me today and for being the first speaker to join us in our CIMC 2025 speaker series.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jen. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Now, I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit about your background and how you first got involved with business resiliency and business continuity.
Well, Jen, I'm a live event producer, and I started my career at Radio City Music Hall, where I put myself through school as an usher. But after graduation, I was involved with theater operations, marketing, and then eventually event planning, management and production of events. Many of the events that we created were related to sports, like halftime shows for the Super Bowl or the Army-Navy game, the opening ceremonies for multiple sports events like the Goodwill Games, the U.S. Olympic Festival. I moved on from Radio City to be the head of events for the National Hockey League, and I did that for 13 seasons with overall responsibility for things like the All-Star Game and the Stanley Cup and the first regular season outdoor game in Edmonton. And then I did the same job for the National Football League for a decade, where I oversaw things that you might have heard of, like the Super Bowl and the NFL Draft, among other things. So now, of course, as you mentioned, I lead my own event management and consulting business called Fast Traffic, and we produce the Indy 500 pre-race show every year, Pro Football Hall of Fame enshrinement, the Hall of Fame game for the NFL. So, with that kind of background, you might wonder, and your listeners might wonder, what sports events have to do with resiliency or continuity, or vice versa. Actually, resiliency and business continuity have a great deal to do with it, because sports is a business. It's just a highly visible one. It's the one that, we tune into on Sunday afternoons to watch a football game. And live sports events are the core product of the sports business, whether it's seen in person by a few hundred people, or in the case of the Indy 500, as many as 325,000 people in one place at one time. We're responsible for enabling the athletes or the competitors to compete at their highest possible level. And we're responsible for entertaining all the people who come to watch them. And we're responsible for delivering the event to potentially millions of people on broadcast media when those events happen. So if something goes wrong, it's not a secret for very long, or from very many people. So we have to have developed actionable contingency plans for a whole range of potential challenges, and they're all out there. They happen all the time. And we have to have protocols on how to respond to those issues when they arise. After all, we're responsible for the safety and security of all those people. And we're responsible for protecting some pretty well-known brands. So for us, response time is actually really, really critical. The clock is always ticking. The exposure is huge. There's tons of people watching everything we're doing. So the more resilient our plans and the more practiced and timely our responses, the smoother our recovery is going to be. And even more recently, you might have noticed that with the wildfires in Los Angeles, for example, playoff games in the NFL were relocated to Arizona. That was already a plan. That was part of the resilience. You can't stop the season. You can't stop the playoffs. That game's got to happen when it's scheduled to happen. Our brand would be irreparably damaged if they didn't. When the Metrodome roof collapsed in Minnesota, we had to move games. It was in the middle of a season. When the Superdome was damaged by Hurricane Katrina, when we had the Super Bowl blackout in 2013, all of those things had to be responded to in real time.
There's so many things that you have to think about when you're coordinating live events. Thinking about your keynote presentation, what are some of the lessons learned that you'll be sharing in your presentation? And you don't have to go into too much detail, but where do you think are some of the most impactful or standout moments in your career?
Well, we're going to spend an hour on those stories, so you're right. I'm not going to spend the hour with it here, but number one, having plans that are actionable. It is so tempting to draw up a plan for a response, a contingency or resilience plan that sounds really good on paper. And then it turns out not to be a viable option when something goes south. That's first and foremost. How do you test the theory without really unplugging everything and starting all over again? You've got to continue doing your business and making your business run and producing your products and producing your services and maintaining great relationships with your clients. But you do have to test the theories, if you will, and test all of those to make sure that you do have viable options. It's like checking off the box if you've written up the plan and then you put it on a shelf, right? Second, you have to communicate those plans to your teammates, so that when something does happen, they don't have to wait for you to show up. Things start to happen. Things start to get responded to. And you have to be really careful to not try to make every solution fit every problem. I worked for a producer who once said, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And you can't use a hammer for absolutely every problem you have. You're going to have to change it up.
Ultimately, what would you like our audience to take away from your presentation?
So I'm going to share 8 or 9 of what I call the mega truths of crisis management, or let's call it resilience. And I think that they're going to be memorable to people because they're drawn from problems that I faced on Super Bowls and All-Star games, and that a lot of the people in the audience probably experienced. The Super Bowl blackout, for example, was something that we had to tackle in real time. And we actually have behind the scenes footage of what was going on, during that kind of chaos, or what appeared to be chaos on television, which really wasn't chaos. It was really a very measured response. It was a very educated response. We counted on experts to help guide us through some very tense, let's call it a half hour during Super Bowl 47 in New Orleans. How we responded, how and why we responded the way we did is really a great case study on how you respond instead of reacting. Right? Taking that beat and then being able to game out what the results might be of any particular action that you might take. So those kinds of things, I think, will be really entertaining for your audience because they can relate to them. They probably saw it from the other side of the television. We were on the inside of the television. But we'll be able to tell those stories in a way that resonates for your audience.
Wasn't there a commercial at the time? Somebody came out with some commercial in the dark. Does it ring a bell?
Yeah, there were a number of them, and they were all on social media. I think Oreo Cookies did one, and there were some others that took advantage of, and I say that kindly, by the way, they took advantage of a great marketing opportunity to be able to poke fun at it. We weren't looking at that.
Oh, of course not.
We were looking at a lot of other things. One of the things that I think we'll talk about, or I know that we're going to talk about, is how social media today plays a really big part in your plan. Because you're not just communicating to media or to your customers with emails anymore. Everybody's a reporter. There's billions of them, and they're all out there, and they all have an opinion, and they will all share information, misinformation, and disinformation, and you have to be able to cut through all of that and get your message out so that your resilience plan is the one that surfaces and not theirs.
Absolutely. Frank, we're so excited to have you as our keynote speaker this April, and we're looking forward to your presentation soon.
Looking forward to it also. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience for listening. The Continuity Insights Management Conference takes place April 28th through the 30th at the Woodlands Resort in the Woodlands, Texas. To learn more about Frank's presentation, the entire conference program featuring over 50 education sessions for business continuity and resilience professionals, registration information, and more, visit continuityinsights.com/CIMC. Early bird discounts for CIMC expire on Friday, February 14th. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Facility Resilience Podcast.